Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 187 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ailon, CEO of Greek University. I am a speaker and now two-time author. Our second book, From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing, is available now. So go and buy that book today on Amazon. Now, we call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there's nothing like great food to bring college students together and fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, I am actually working on beating the opioid addiction crisis in Middle Tennessee by working with an amazing coalition that's called Drug Free Wilco, as well as Middle Tennessee State University's Center for Health and Human Services, to get really big grants from the state level, from the federal level. It's totaling over $1.7 million and implementing amazing initiatives such as education in businesses and schools, jail-based transition specialists to help people to transition back into society, as well as a diversion center for people to get help for the addictions that they have and then ultimately get them back to work. Putting them in jail is not going to help them. You need to treat the underlying factors there. You need to treat the addiction. And if you can do that, then you're going to have a great society out there. And I think that really kind of parlays very well into the conversation that we're going to have today with our next guest. His name is Joshua Shea. And what's really interesting is nobody on the planet has given more interviews than him about pornography addiction in the world since 2018. He is a certified betrayal trauma coach. He's a pornography addiction expert and author. He's also a TEDx Talk Speaker. He did TEDx Hartford back in December 2020. He is a sought-after radio and podcast guest. He's had over 200 interviews on radio, TV, print, and podcasts since 2018. He also has publicly talked about porn addiction more than any other person. He focuses on his story, a bunch of eye-opening statistics, and specific knowledge of pornography addiction to share the message that this truly is the addiction that nobody wants to talk about. His second book, the 2019 release, He's a Porn Addict, Now What?, and an updated version of his 2018 memoir, The Addiction Nobody Talks About, are both available on Amazon or on his website, which is recoveringpornaddict.com. His newest book, Porn and Pandemic, How 3 Months in 2020 Changed Everything, was released in the summer of 2020. So be sure to check that out. And what can I say? Welcome to the show, Joshua Shea.
Hey, thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate you bringing me on a show that, is about something I love, food.
There you go.
I've traveled this country and traveled this world, and the first thing I do when I get there is what is there to eat around here.
Yes,
so
you see,
I get it. You
and I are the same way. I need to find out what are the best restaurants in town as I'm traveling around the country, because if I'm going to spend all this time away from home, you better believe I'm going to eat well.
Exactly. And there's just something to not needing the Olive Garden everywhere you go.
No.
Hey, great breadsticks, but no, there's so many independent small businesses need to be supported.
Please.
My wife and I went to what's a great restaurant here in central Maine last night, which is a Sunday, because we thought it'd be kind of empty. And the first restaurant we chose called us back a half hour later, canceling our reservation because they didn't have enough employees. So we ended up going to a secondary place where amazing restaurant, again, so few employees, and it's like, man, this is hurting my stomach. What's going on in this world? I know there are bigger problems, but my stomach's what I think about. That's where my second brain is these days, now that I'm not a porn addict anymore. And my second brain needs some nourishment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's all just go out there and support some of these small local restaurants, because they are hurting. I'm seeing all kinds of staffing issues at some of these local, restaurants in these small towns. They can't find anybody to staff the place. And I'm like, I'll pay you. Just please stay in business, because your food is amazing. And I don't want to go to eat at Olive Garden. I really, really don't.
Exactly. And and it's kind of funny, because all of what I find, and this is not the topic, but what I find is that all of these kind of political issues people were talking about wage earning and tips versus wage and all this that we were having real debates of 5 years ago, it's just happening naturally now. And you know, it doesn't matter what minimum wage is anymore if no one's willing to work for it.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
it's just a fascinating time in our country. And I'm just thrilled that things like colleges are coming back. My son is a freshman this year. So I've already driven out to Ithaca 2 different times, and I can't wait for Thanksgiving in a couple of weeks, because boy, that's a fun ride for upstate New York.
There it is.
But it was so great being on his campus. I was just came back from Parents Weekend. It was my first time ever going to one. And I had such a good time being back on a college campus with the energy, with the idea that we can take on the world and make it a better place still. And such a wonderful thing to see. I think that the world going back to normal on a college campus is almost more important than it coming back together anywhere else, perhaps with the exception of very early elementary school.
Yeah, it definitely keeps me young. I mean, I think that's why I love doing the work that I do. There's no question about it. Does your son go to Ithaca College? What school does he go to?
He does. He's at the Park School for Communication.
Very good. It's a great school and a beautiful area. I mean, you know, it's gorgeous.
It is beautiful. It's tough to get to, but it's beautiful.
It's very hard to get to, but stunning. So that's really great.
Yes.
Now, speaking about colleges, you decided on Emerson College for your undergraduate experience. So why was Emerson the right place for you?
This is going to sound stupid, but it's going to sound exactly how a 17 or 18-year-old male makes his decisions, is that at the time, the dorm that I would have been in was 1 block from Fenway Park.
Wow.
And that was, I got into NYU, I got into USC. I wanted to go for film. I mean, truthfully, I always wanted to be a writer on Saturday Night Live. And a few people gave me some school names, and it was closest to home of the major decent universities I got into. And I felt like I could probably thrive there because I knew Boston well. It's only 2.5 hours from my house. I know New York City decently, but it was still a little bit, I don't know, scary, the idea of going to, Boston, I think, is 350,000 and New York is what, 6-7 million.
Right.
So it's just exponentially larger than Boston. I went out, looked at USC. Honestly, the neighborhood scared me. And this is only because I recognized it from the LA riots. And keep in mind the LA riots and Rodney King, for people who are younger than you and I watching. This was 1994, late 93, when I'm going out and looking at colleges. And I can, go to that intersection where the trucker got dragged out of his truck and beaten up. And it's still so fresh in my mind. So I think if I could go back and do it all over, I would probably pick USC because of the opportunities that are out there. My brother went into this as well. He ended up going out to college in Syracuse, then going to college in LA. Yeah, finishing up there. He lived there for 25 years, got into entertainment, did everything I wanted to do, ironically, and painfully. And then he ended up coming back. But I just see being out there, if you want to be in entertainment from a TV or movie perspective, you have to be out there. You can do so much more in New York, but you have to be out there. But again, I'm an 18-year-old guy at the time. I love the Red Sox. The biggest tattoo I have is of the Red Sox. And hey, Fenway Park was there. I was taking a tour and I could hear people cheering. And I'm like, oh my God, this is Valhalla for 5-year-old Josh. I don't care what they teach. I'm here. So that's a lot how that happened. I would have made different decisions based on being an adult now, but sometimes I think you make decisions and you go into it, and I don't regret that decision at all.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I mean, Fenway Park is just a beautiful place. And now's probably the right time to tell you that I was at Yankees Red Sox, the last the playoff series, the 1-game playoff series this season.
You were there?
I was in Fenway Park for that. Yeah.
Oh man, nice. I went to a division series game.
Nice.
I was at the 13-inning game where what's his name, the catcher Vasquez, hit the home run in the 13th inning. I've never, and this was my first time back to Fenway in 10 years, because along with the pornography, I had an alcohol addiction too. And so I haven't been to Fenway in about 10 years because I was afraid of going back. And then being there with the energy of the playoffs and
Oh,
an extra innings, walk-off home run win. I have never been around that much positive energy in my
yeah.
life. It was one of
It's
the
electric.
greatest experiences.
Yeah, it was electric. I had the same experience, and it was just absolutely electric. I mean, Yankees Red Sox was already going to be ramped up, but the fact that it was a one
Oh
game
yeah.
series was just everybody was all in on every pitch. We didn't sit down the entire
Oh
nine
no,
innings.
no, that
No,
was
no
such a
sitting.
fun game. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that
it
was
was
such a
great.
fun game. And it got me back into baseball for the first time since the pandemic started.
Sure.
I didn't watch last season because it started late and was so weird. And then this season, it took me a long time to get into it. But thank God the Red Sox got back to that because it made me feel like a normal sports fan again.
Right, I agree. So, all right. So you mentioned the porn addiction. You mentioned the alcohol addiction. I mean, tell us your own story of this porn addiction.
Well, I mean, the quick version is that I'm not that unique. I am very dead on textbook when it comes to pornography addiction.
Mhm.
I think the greatest study that was done on porn and sex addiction was by Dr. Patrick Carnes. I'm sure you know the name. He's kind of the godfather of study in this area. He was doing it in the 90s, even before we were all on the internet. And one of his groundbreaking studies showed that of men, and I'm sure the numbers are different now, but of men, back when he did this study in the US, just over 70% who ended up being a porn or sex addict had some kind of unresolved trauma based on physical abuse.
Mhm.
Just over 80% had similar trauma based on sexual abuse, and over 90% had that kind of trauma based on mental or emotional abuse. In my case, it was mental, emotional, and sexual at the hands of a babysitter when I was 3 to 6, 3 to 7.
Mhm.
And I ended up leaving her at that point. But being a young kid, I didn't develop any, real coping methods. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand. So at 12 years old, my older cousin introduced me to pornography, hardcore pornography, not just naked people, but naked people doing naked things. And it was the first time I ever saw it. And I tell you, I became an addict probably within 30 seconds.
Wow.
People talk about a long addictive cycle. It's like, no, mine was more like a light switch. I had a warm feeling come over me. And I'm sure you've heard people talk about the feeling when they take in heroin and how it's the warm flush.
Mhm.
That is exactly what I felt. The only other time I've ever felt this in my life was 2 years later when I got drunk for the first time at a wedding. And then from that point forward, I had these two things in my life, pornography and alcohol. And I figured out as a smart 15-year-old kid how to get my hands on both, and every day if I wanted. And from 15 to 37, it didn't matter whether I was in high school, college, early career, later career, didn't matter if I was dating with nobody or if I'd been with my wife for 5 or 6 years at that point. Nothing mattered as long as I could get to my pornography, and to a lesser extent my alcohol, but my pornography. That was my crutch. That was the thing I leaned on. That's the thing that got me through my days. And I was an overachiever. I was very good at hiding my addictions. Very few people recognized what was going on, but it was a degenerative condition from the first day. And everything that happened to me, every way it blew up in my face, I don't see a different way that the story could have ended.
Wow. So for years on the outside, people saw you as a successful magazine publisher, a
Yeah.
film festival founder, and city councilor. And you hid all of those mental health issues, the pornography, the alcohol addictions. You hid everything from the world. And the end to this facade came in 2013 after you engaged a teenage girl in an online chat room. So for this particular action, you served 6 months in jail. And
Mhm.
you credit this experience to being the wake-up call that you needed in life. So, this is like mind-blowing to me. I mean, how did your family and all the professional contacts that you had built up, how did they handle all of this news and information?
Well, when it ends up on the front page of the newspaper, and when it's the top story of every TV news, you don't avoid it. It's funny. and I'm not going to get too deep into my psyche, but I always wanted attention from people. I always wanted people to know what I'm doing. So I think that drove me a lot. Why did I become a magazine publisher? So people could read what I wrote, because then I had no reins on me. I had started a film festival so I could see really awesome movies before everybody else and talk to movie stars. And I became a city councilor, and it for the wrong reason. I became to see if I could win a popularity contest. And I did. I hated being one, but I wanted to see if I could win a popularity contest. So all of this stuff was going on where I was just craving attention from other people. And, you know, as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for, because there I am, six columns across the top of the newspaper. There I am at 10:30 the night that I got arrested, you know, the CBS News affiliate doing a live remote from my front yard. So everybody found out. It was nothing that I could even try to hide. Mainly, you know, that first day was shock. That first day was also trying to quickly tell my parents, hey, I got arrested this morning. Some stuff went down. I don't know how this is going to come out and how this is going to look in the media, because I worked in the media, and I know there are two types of reporters out there. There are the ones who slant things, and there are the ones who just get things wrong. I always tried to just be one of the ones who got things wrong. Because when you're given bad information and you print it, you don't know. If you're given good information, you try to slant it, that's wrong. But I know how often things are incorrect, not because the reporter is wrong. And I know how often the police and the legal system doesn't care if they get anything wrong, because they don't care about the media. So I had to tell my parents, if you have any questions, or my very close friends, if you have any questions, come ask me, because I'm sure I'm going to get indicted on 5,000 things, because you can indict a ham sandwich if you want to. And when that happened several months later, you know, I did have a lot thrown at me, but it was an interesting thing, because I would say my co-owners of my company, they fired me that night, and rightfully so. I would have done the same thing. But I was impressed with probably about 20, 25 people who reached out to me in those first 2 or 3 days, who, even if they said to me, I have to pull your contract from, I have to pull the contract from your magazine, I can't be associated with this professionally, they would still say, hey, personally, we all screw up, we all make mistakes. You know, I've made mistakes and thankfully gotten away with them. Or other people would tell me, you know, I'm by you, I'm on your side. Obviously, I'm not by your side professionally. I can't do that, but I'm by your side. So that made me feel a little bit better. And within 10 days of getting arrested, I was in alcohol rehab first, because I honestly didn't even know porn addiction was an addiction when I went to alcohol rehab first. It was people who knew me knew that there had to be something else going on. I think that they knew in their heart I'm not some kind of evil guy trolling playgrounds. I was too busy to be that guy. There was something else going on. And I think most people, I had released a story in my magazine about a year earlier about how I had bipolar disorder and tried to hide it for a long time. So I think that opened me up to a lot of people, and they understood that I was wired a little bit differently. And they could see that anyway, because I was the most active person in my community. People would say to me all the time, you know, you seem like you have 3 or 4 full-time jobs and you have a family. You know, how do you do it? And I used to joke, and it was only half jokingly, you have no idea how half my energy is still spent keeping my crap together and not going completely insane. And yet I still do all this stuff. In retrospect, I realized that that was part of the problem, was doing all that stuff and isolating and escaping to things that I was good at. You know, I have, all these years later, I have come to the conclusion that whether you treated me well or you treated me poorly, it's okay. Everybody has their reactions. I'm at the absolute core, I'm the only one who absolutely knew what happened. And that's true with O.J. Simpson. That's true with Michael Jackson. That's true with every crime, every person in this world. We just have things that we don't know about. And thankfully, there are people in this world who do not judge others based on their biggest mistake, and or define them based on their biggest mistake. those are now my people. Those are the people I appreciate. And that's how I now look at the world. And I think that's why addiction is so close to my heart. And not just porn, not just alcoholism. You talk opiates, gambling, all that, addicts have a story, and you cannot define them based on a couple really bad decisions.
Well, let's dig into this a little bit. Explain to our audience what's wrong with looking at pornography.
Well, on a completely legal level, if you're looking at legal pornography, there is nothing wrong with it. It's legal. If the people in it are above age, it's fine. If you came upon it through regular circumstances, that's fine. So that's the black and white side of it. Now, there is a percentage of people who will become addicts. Okay, let's move them aside. That's a completely different issue. As far as pornography in society, I think that we live in two different worlds right now, and people don't truly recognize that. I think that people who are your age, my age, we're in this middle generation X that has just stood and watched the world burn because it's been absolutely fascinating to watch. Our parents, our grandparents, very conservative generations, especially when it comes to sexuality and that kind of stuff. It was all taboo. I mean, everything from nudity to talking about mental health to any talk of sex to anything, all 100%. You cannot look at this stuff. You cannot talk about this stuff, and you're a dirty pervert if you think about it. And our parents and even us were kind of preach that. I think that something in our generation recognized it was wrong, but we didn't do much about it. And I think that we also saw the internet come out, and I remember being young thinking, oh my, when I was 22, 23, thinking, oh my God, this is the greatest porn invention that's ever happened. And then then it became my porn use of, the main way I got my porn. Well, that's only after years of videotapes, years of magazines, years of other things. Now you've got this group that are under 30 that don't recognize a world before the internet. Mm-hmm. And this group has had unending, unfettered access to pornography. If you told, this is a little bit crass, but it really does describe it in graphic terms. If you said to my grandfather, hey, do women have sex with horses? He would have, oh my God, are you crazy? No. If you said that to you and me, 20 years ago, what? And now you say that to somebody who's 20 years old and they're like, oh yeah, you want to see it? And that's the thing, is that we now have this younger generation that has had such access to visual sexuality that it has dropped a lot of their taboos. And I think what we have is we are now living in a world where the under 30, 35 group has very little lines and very few taboos when it comes to sexuality. And you've got the group older than you and I who had the most unhealthy Puritan views, and we're seeing a giant swing back and forth, and it needs to hit somewhere in the middle. People over 40 years old, they don't know what OnlyFans is. Yet if you're 22 years old, OnlyFans is a regular part of your culture. My daughter is 22. She has an OnlyFans page, not because she is a performer, but because she has friends, male and female, who it's just in the culture to support your friend by subscribing. And it's like, oh my God, at 22, if one of my friends said, hey, will you subscribe me? Will you support me by spending $10 to look at me naked for a month? And it's like, that is the strangest question I've ever heard. But that's what is now normal in our younger society. And when you think about things like, okay, you and I, if we were in high school now, we didn't have social media when we were in high school. Instagram, just think about that for a second. If there would have been a picture of the sexy cheerleader and the buff football player who always seemed to date each other, if there was a picture of them like at the beach in the bikini and little short shorts, that would have been passed around my class like it was currency. It would have been the number one, oh my God, did you see the picture? Did you see the picture? And think about it now. You go to any high school and it's almost expected that every 16 and 17-year-old are going to have half naked pictures of themselves on Instagram. And you're gonna, they're gonna be wearing thongs and short shorts and little bikini tops or their underwear. And when you're 17 doing that, when you become 18, how much of a big jump is it to become somebody who takes off those shorts or drops the bikini top? If you've been raised in an environment and in a world where there's nothing wrong with that, where there are no repercussions, not just photos showing up later, which I don't think is going to be that big a deal. I actually think that it's the mental health fallout from it that's going to be a much bigger deal that we don't know about. And that to me is part of the pornography issue. Part of it is that, and this, will speak to the area you talk about, college campuses. One of the last times before the pandemic, I was able to be at a college campus. I gave a presentation at their health center to a women's sexuality group. And at the end of it, at the end of my, song and dance, I do the Q&A, and one of the younger women who was quiet the whole time, she raised her hand, probably 19 or 20, and said, "Have you heard about women my age, who don't want to have sex with virgin men?" And I was like, "No, but what does this have to do with pornography?" The moment she started talking, I realized what she was talking about. It's that the average guy looks at porn now for the first time at 9 or 10. They become a regular viewer, usually between 12 and 14. Okay, that's fine. That's the vast majority of guys and quite a few females as well. But if you think about it, these 12 and 13-year-old boys, if they're watching even 1 or 2 clips a day until they're 18, that's thousands of clips of pornography. And even if it's the most vanilla pornography, think about the images that they're getting. They've got men talking nasty to women, men being aggressive towards women, bending them like a pretzel, and that doesn't even talk about how just about every porno clip ends, on a girl's face. And that is not how normal people have sex. That is not what normal sexuality is between a man and a woman. Forget love, just in most regular cases of life. And those of us who, whether you've had one night stands or whether you've had a long monogamous relationship, those of us who've been there know that pornography is not a documentary. It's not a reality show. But if you've been watching from 12 to 18, you've never been with a woman, and you finally find yourself with a girl in college, and you're a virgin, and she's finally going to, be the one who lets you cross that line. And so what do a lot of guys do? They fall back on their muscle memory and they start to act like a porn star. And since I had this conversation, about a year and a half ago with this group, I've talked with many other college aged women about this. And they have, "Oh yes, she is right. That girl is dead on." How many young women do not want to be with a guy who has not had sex yet because they are patterning themselves after pornography? And that's not what these young women want. So there are now young women around the college age level who will specifically try to stay away from guys in their age group who are virgins because they don't want to have to reteach them. They don't want to have to explain why why the pornography they watched is not real, why they don't want to have their hand around their neck or to be, called a little whore and a little slut, because that's not sexy, that's not intimate. And they don't want to go down that road. So yeah, aside from the addiction part of things, we are raising a generation of young men to believe that the sex that they are going to have one day is going to look like porn. And we are not talking to them about it. We are not teaching them about it. We are not making them think of their partner's needs, even in a one-night stand situation. And that's a real shame, because we are going to move into a more unhealthy sexual society if we don't start talking about some of these attitudes we have towards sex. And I always tell people, Mike, that I'm not necessarily anti-pornography. I am pro-healthy sexuality. And unfortunately, pornography is a tool that's put into hands of those who are too young, who do not know the potential outcome, who do not know what can happen. And We need that to change in our society. And that's just the problem with pornography, especially with our young people.
Wow, this is fascinating conversation. I'm also wondering, how did the COVID-19 pandemic change the landscape of online pornography?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I thought I was done being a journalist. I'd already written 2 books, and then the pandemic hit, and I was doing some of these interviews, and everybody started asking. So I started doing the research, and it scared the crap out of me. Um, an organization like Pornhub, they came and I'm going to first of all say that I totally believe in a market economy. I believe in business. I believe in all that. The pandemic was the best business happening for so many people in this world, and top of that list was online pornography. Because if you look at the very beginning of the pandemic in places like France, Italy, Spain, where it first hit, that is where Pornhub launched a marketing campaign of, we are going to give everybody in these countries 1 free week to our premium site. Now, you compare the numbers in 2019 for usage of Pornhub to the numbers in 2020, especially in those 3 countries, you will see some days a 60 to 70% jump in traffic year over year, because everybody was stuck at home with nothing to do and nobody to go see. And think about if you're a 23 or 24-year-old socially and sexually active young person now stuck at home. You know, it's almost a given what's going to happen. Now, with this being a given, so we saw the rates go shooting up of consuming. They went off the rails almost overnight. My big fear about the pandemic, and I started to allude to this in the book, but I've developed this even more with more research over the last year, is that I don't think the legacy of the pandemic is going to be from the pornography consumer side. I think it's going to come from the pornography producer's side, because on January 1st, 2020, there was an estimated 300,000 producers on the OnlyFans website. 300,000 people around the world, 95% of it's pornography. They do have some people who try to use the platform other ways. About a month and a half, 2 months ago, there was a small window where it looked like OnlyFans was going to cancel pornography from their site because they were having issues with their payment gateways. You can't get paid, well, there's no point in having a website. But they worked those out and then announced that they were not going to ban pornography. And in their announcement, the CEO said, we can now, promise our 2 million producers that blah, 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 blah. So that means in the space of about 18 months, we have gone on one website from 300,000 pornography producers to 2 million pornography producers. OnlyFans has created 1.7 million more, quote unquote, porn stars in this last, year and a half. That's only one website. When I did this book last year, I interviewed many of the men and women who were old timers on OnlyFans, who were old timers on cam sites, and then I interviewed a bunch of newbies who joined only after the pandemic. I interviewed them right at the beginning of my research, and then I interviewed them again about 2 months later at the end of my research. There was very little difference in the veterans, and in talking to them, I was able to learn how the consumer changed a little bit. But what was more during the early pandemic, what was more fascinating to me was talking to the rookies. And these were usually younger men and women, 18, 20, 22. And what I heard from them that second time I talked to them, those who were still doing it, most of them, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was, or many of them, it wasn't about the money. I heard things like, I can't get a date in real life. I can't get a boyfriend in real life. I can't get a girlfriend in real life. Now I have people 24/7. I jump on here and they immediately want to talk to me and hang out with me. I lost my boyfriend a year ago and I haven't been able to date since. Now I have men asking me for my hand in marriage and I know they're serious. Or I feel so ugly in real life but I have men sending me $200 worth of lingerie, and I take pictures for them in it, and it makes me feel so beautiful. And hearing this, woman after woman, young man after young man, it was, oh my goodness, what they are describing is the chemical rush of addiction. They're talking about the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, all the fun stuff in your head, why you become an addict because you flood those pleasure centers. That's exactly what these people are doing. It's they don't talk about the money anymore. They don't talk about I put in these hours and I structure this like this. This is no longer a job to these people who are new. Talk to the veterans, it's still a job. Oh, I'm camming from 12 to 2, and then I'm on OnlyFans from 12 to 1. And these people set it up like it's a career, and God bless them. But these younger people who had just discovered this, they were clearly addicted to the love, to the attention, to what they were getting, secondary to what they thought that they were getting. And what I heard from them was a lot of addiction, a lot of being neglected, a lot of trauma. And it was sad because I can picture, these guys and girls who are 20 now being 45 years old, making 1/3 the money they're making now, but still stripping online in 25 years because it gives them some kind of rush. It gives them some kind of high. It takes away their stress or the anxiety of real life. It was by the book addiction that they were describing to me. And ultimately, I think that's what we're going to take out of this, because we now know the very early studies about pornography and the internet. They've been going 10, 20 years. We know early numbers. We don't know anything about the people producing porn because we haven't had the kind of numbers we've needed to study. In the 80s or 90s, what was there, 1,000 porn stars out in California, and that was basically it. And now, and I'm obviously using the term porn star lightly, but there are now millions of people producing and selling their own pornography online.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to do something to our society. We just don't know what yet. And I think that's going to be the true legacy of the pandemic when it comes to this area.
So is that why the non-addicts should really care about porn addiction? Because we don't know what's going to happen to all of these millions of producers and how that's going to impact society?
Well, I guess I put it this way. If you don't smoke cigarettes, do you know why you don't smoke cigarettes? Have you ever been offered a cigarette? Have you had to make a conscious decision? Maybe you quit smoking cigarettes. Maybe you still smoke cigarettes. But I'm going to guess no matter what category you're in, the dangers of cigarettes.
Yes.
You are either making a decision, and I'll be honest, you're either making a bad decision based on the information you have, or you're making a good decision based on the information you have. But you have the information. And that's what's lacking in our society when it comes to pornography. We are still dealing with, on the governmental level, a lot of people from the generations above us who won't even talk about this stuff, don't want to talk about anything that has to do with sexuality, mental health, any of that. It's still older white guys who are deciding on the government level what's happening. However, when you look at the younger people, the younger people tend not to trust older people. The younger people tend to turn their backs on older people, tend to disagree with them. And when you've got people of our parents' age, and even most people our age, not willing to talk to their kids about it, not willing to have conversations about it, they are either going to go into it blind or go into it thinking that it's an okay thing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make you evil to look at it. It doesn't make you perverted. There's nothing wrong with you. Statistics suggest that far more people under 50 look at porn at least once a month and pleasure themselves to porn at least once a month online than those who don't. So it's a regular thing, but we are not talking about this. And we are now in a place where the absolute scariest statistic I can share with you is from the Barna Group, 2017 or 2018. They're out of Texas. They did a study of American men, all demographics, races, religions, all of that, but just looking at men in the 18 to 30-year-old age group. 32 to 33% said that they either know they look at too much porn, they're developing a problem with pornography, or they have an addiction. Now, granted, that is self-diagnosed, but who should know better than a person if they have a problem, and how many people are still in denial? So if 1 out of 3 men under 30, the internet generation, believes they have some kind of maladaptive behavior with pornography, well, what is going to happen when they turn 35 or 40 or 50 or 60 if we don't do anything about this? And I absolutely, my heart goes out to these people. I coach these people on a daily basis. But the only way that we're going to have any effect on this is on the younger people, is to, pull our heads out of our butts and be the parents and be the leaders and the teachers that we need in this area. And yes, I understand it's a scary subject. I understand it's a subject we don't have a lot of knowledge of. But this is where we find ourselves in 2021, 2022, that we have to deal with this. In the 1950s, our parents had to hide under desks because nuclear war was coming in school. Jesus, I couldn't imagine the amount of anxiety that would have caused 8-year-old Josh. But we don't have to do that anymore because we realize nuclear bombs go through roofs and desks. That's not going to save you. So why traumatize you right before you're about to die? So we don't do that anymore. It's not 1950. However, it is 2021, 2022, and we need to start talking about pornography because the internet has brought it into our homes. The internet is going nowhere, and human sexuality is going nowhere. And we can't have this look the other way attitude, because even people who are perfectly healthy, by silence of society, by people being, shh, don't talk about that stuff, you get the feeling that it's bad, it's wrong, it's taboo. And there's nothing wrong with human sexuality, healthy human sexuality. It's a wonderful thing. You and I may not want to think about it, but it was our parents getting busy one night that is the reason we're here. And our kids will not want to think about it when it comes to us. But that's why we're here. And sexuality is not a bad thing. Sexuality is a wonderful thing. But if you don't know what a powerful thing it can be, especially at a young age, it can cause some deep scars. It can cause some deep marks if it's not used wisely or correctly. And my entire mission, whether it's my books or my coaching or any of this, is there's a piece of me that wonders, what could 8-year-old Josh have been told? What could I have learned? What could I have seen? Is there anything that anybody could have said or done that I wouldn't have gone down this road? I didn't become an opioid addict. I didn't become a cigarette addict. I didn't become a gambling addict. Granted, I did become an alcoholic, but is porn something that could have been stopped with me with education, with some piece of information that would have stopped me? And that's kind of what I'm out there now doing, almost as a penance, I feel like, to the world, although I really enjoy it and it gives me a lot of feeling of purpose. But are there any 8-year-old Joshes or Josephines that I can teach their parents to say something? Or are there any 17-year-old Josephs or Josephines who are listening to us who are like, ooh, this is actually a real thing. I need to take care of this. Is Josephine or Joseph's or Josh's parents listening? It's like, oh, we need, because their kid's 3 now. Okay, we need a strategy for this now as they get older, much like so many other things. So that's why I'm out there doing this, because we need to have, we just need to talk about this as a society. And if we can't say the word pornography, how are we going to be able to talk about pornography addiction?
Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of college students listening right now that are recognizing that they have a problem, or maybe their partner has a problem. So what can a person do after learning their partner has an addiction to porn? What's the next step?
Well, the first thing is that you have to decide for yourself that you are going, if you are morally opposed to porn, if your values don't align with porn, you do have to ask yourself, is it worth being in this battle with this person standing by their side? I always tell people when they are young that, you haven't been married for 25 years. When I sit down and talk to a married woman who discovered her husband is a porn addict, or I sit down with the couple to work on it, I give them some different advice who have been married for 25 years than people who aren't even 25 years old in age. And the idea is that you were young, you are not beholden to stand by this person. You do not have to, it is not your battle as well. If you want to stay with them, that's fantastic and that's admirable. but understand this is not like them getting over a cold or a broken leg. This is a very different thing. First, the second thing you need to do if you're going to stay is to decide that you're going to not be judgmental and create a safe space. Now, if they get into details, you will probably hear that they have looked at things that you could only imagine, that in parts of your mind just absolutely make you scream and are grossed out. Do not judge them on that. That's one of the biggest things that porn addicts fear, is that there's a level of shame because, oh my God, I was watching old ladies in diapers. Well, you know what? If you're an addict and you've been an addict for 6, 7 years and you're looking at porn every day and you have fried your pleasure receptors, you are going to probably be looking at extreme things, because it's like an alcoholic who starts with beer, moves to wine, has to go to the hard stuff. It's the gambling addict who does $20 a hand, then 50, then 100. Just to get the same highs, you have to go to more extreme places. And if you're dealing with someone who's an addict, well, then they probably have been there. Don't judge them for that. Make them feel safe. Make them feel like they won't be judged. They won't be shamed. That's when you're going to get communication about this, because it is such a taboo, shameful subject for many people. And then what you can do is just let them know that you were there for them. And you can say that, I know a little bit about addiction, and I've heard a little bit about pornography addiction. I think that you may be showing some of those symptoms. And all I want to say is, please be careful. Please watch it, and maybe go talk to somebody, because those symptoms of addiction, which 95% of addiction, as you know, takes place in the brain. Porn addiction isn't in the genitals. Food addiction isn't in the stomach. It's all up in the brain. And so it's very similar to other addictions as far as the motivations and then why you end up as an addict. So just keep that in mind. This is not a failure of them morally. This is not them being evil. This is not them having some sick, twisted, perverted, deep, dark side. The person is sick. So you've got to treat them like a sick person. And at that point, you will probably, the first time you mention it, you'll probably either hear, oh, you're crazy, no way. Or you'll hear, okay, thanks, whatever. Or hey, maybe I do, okay, thanks. You're probably not going to get a fall on your knees, take me to rehab Jesus moment. What you can do as a partner or a friend or a family member is plant a seed. And then you can come back to them a few weeks later. And have you thought about what I said? Would you, would there be any value in you sitting down and talking to a therapist or a coach or going to a meeting and just figuring out, where is your baseline? Hey, maybe I'm totally wrong, but what if I'm right? What if you do have a problem and you don't even realize it? What if, there is something that can be done now instead of later? When I was in rehab for alcohol first, then about a year later for porn and sex. I was so jealous of the college age kids. Their spouses will never know about this, or they'll know about it, but hopefully, but they won't have experienced it. Their kids won't have experienced it. Their families will not remember them strictly as this person. Unfortunately, when I was going through all my trouble 10 years ago, my kids, my son was in 4th grade, my daughter was just starting high school. They were well aware of what was going on. My parents were school teachers in our community. They had just retired, but everybody knew who they were. And it's one of these things where it's like, I look back and go, man, if I could have only taken care of this at 18 or 22 or whatever it is, that is such a big deal. So that's one of the things that I would also lean on. If you only have, okay, I understand that you don't think you have a problem, but let's say you have the step below a problem, whatever that's called. If you go talk to somebody now, it may never become a problem. It may never become an issue in your life. I am an example of not doing a damn thing about it for 20 plus years. I am where you end up that way. I am a cautionary tale. One of the things that I always push to people when I talk to them is that a porn addict can be anybody. A lot of people fall into this idea. My partner can't be a porn addict. They're a bank president. Or, my wife can't be a porn addict. She's a woman. Or he's too old to be a porn addict. She's too young. Oh, Indian people aren't porn addicts. Oh, Canadians aren't like that. I've heard some crazy stuff in this area about why someone is disqualified as a porn addict. And the reality is, anybody can be a porn addict. You know, I was a guy who owned 2 businesses, was a politician, wife and 2 kids. Everything looked good from the outside. You know, I'm not I think people think porn addict and they think of 17, 18-year-old guy who has never kissed a girl in real life living in mom's basement, or the 80-year-old creepy guy running through the park flashing people. And I'm sure they are porn addicts, but I have met men, women from 15 to 75. Every type of demographic you can imagine. Anybody can be a porn addict. And while, you know, we touched briefly upon my my illegal issues, or the issues when I ended up talking to that teenage girl online, I never thought it would get there, obviously. I paid my price. I know what I did was wrong. It was reprehensible, and that's part of why I'm out here doing this every day. But I don't want people to hear, oh, well, I could never get to that level. Well, trust me, people, 23 of my 24 years, I never thought I could get to that level either, but I did. And that's the thing. If somebody brings up to you, maybe you have an issue, and you immediately say no, there's a reason they brought that up. It's one of the questions I get asked the most when I sit down with a potential client for the first time is, how do I know if I'm a porn addict? How do I know if I have a problem? And I tell them, well, do you worry about having a problem with vacuuming? Do you have an addiction to vacuuming? No. Have you ever asked yourself if you have an addiction to vacuuming? Well, no. Well, that's because you don't have an addiction to vacuuming. And why would you ask yourself if you had an addiction to something? Because you know that you're developing one, or you know that it's a problem. And if you know that, now is the time to go get help. You may not be a full-blown addict who needs the most intense treatment. You may be very early in addiction. You may not even rise to the level of addiction yet. And my God, there is the time to take care of this problem. If anybody brings it up to you that you have a problem in whatever, look into it, because if somebody is recognizing that, you may not recognize it in yourself. We have giant blind spots in our lives. And that's something that most people don't acknowledge, are these gaping blind spots that it's not just a matter of denial, it's a matter of we can't do anything about them. So when people offer that kind of advice, or you hear it from 2 or 3 people, be smart and listen. And if you're the loved one of somebody who's like that, you can't force them to do anything, unfortunately. You're never going to be the one to make that final decision. But you can nudge them. And in the case of partners, especially romantic partners, you can create certain boundaries that you will not allow the other person to cross, or that you will need to continue in the relationship. And as long as you're willing to enforce those boundaries, that is a great way to nudge somebody into some kind of treatment or some kind of evaluation, at least. You know, I will not be sleeping with you until you go and talk to a doctor about this. Oh, well, I want to have sex with you, so fine, whatever, I'll go see the stupid doctor. And it clicks. I mean, when I went to rehab for alcoholism, I said to myself, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm going to play the stupid game for 28 days, and I'm going to enjoy the Southern California sun. And after about 8 days, it clicked, because I did the math on how many times I had driven drunk. That was my giant wake-up call, that I did the math, and it was over 1,600 times that I had driven drunk. And that was the light over my head. I wasn't at that rehab for 28 days. I was at that rehab for 70 days. That's also, at the end of that, was when I discovered porn addiction was a real thing. And porn addiction was something that I also had. Had I faked it for 28 days, I never would have got to that point. And had I not embraced it, I never would have got to that point. So it was really coming to the terms of, gee, maybe I'm not Teflon. Gee, maybe I have a problem. And if you're open to that, I think you can make your life a lot better. And what's the worst thing that happens? A professional tells you, no, you don't actually have a problem. This person might have been a little ways off, but just watch it. Great, great. That's the worst case scenario. You know, you have to be proactive. And I think if you are a concerned friend, partner, family member, whatever, it's absolutely okay to bring it up super casually, and let it go. Plant the seed and walk away.
Now, I'm a parent. I have a couple of kids like you do. What do we need to do for this next generation of kids to not end up as addicted as the current generations?
I think that we need to all move to the North Pole and build igloos that have no wireless access.
Right.
Because all we can do, I mean, here's what we do for the next generation. We raise them with age appropriate messages.
Mm.
And that's what needs to happen. You know, at 6 years old, you can tell a child, hey, if you're using one of your iPads, or if you're at a friend's house and they have their phone, or you're watching TV and there are naked people on the screen doing naked things, just come tell mommy or daddy, because little kids aren't supposed to see that stuff. And we want to make sure we protect you. We're supposed to keep you safe. So let me know if you see it so I can make sure you don't see it again. And next year you can say to them, hey, I just wanted to tell you, you shouldn't ever let anybody take any pictures of you when you're in your underwear or when you're out of your underwear. And you also, but I have to tell you, you're not allowed to take pictures of people in their underwear or when they have no underwear on either. We just don't do that kind of stuff. That's not safe. That's not good. So, you know, we don't do that. And then as they get a little bit older, as they become more, you know, learn more about their bodies, excuse me, learn more about society, they'll learn, you know, you can start talking about pornography at 9 or 10, because trust me, they know what it is at 9 or 10. They may not know the word pornography, but they know what it is. And when I talk to, when I give presentations, or talking to parents online, and there's always one who will come up to me and say, hey, you didn't even talk about filters. How come? We have filters, so we're okay. I'm like, wow, you have filters? Wow. So you're telling me you've been able to lock down one of the 4.8 billion phones in the world? Thank you. Thank you. You've done my job for me. I only have to talk to 4.7999999 billion more people, and then my crusade is done. And it's like, no, what you need to do is get your kids prepared to see pornography. If your kid gets on the bus in 3rd or 4th grade, fine, you've got their locks on their phones. You don't know that the kid next to them does. You don't know that the kid next to them in study hall does. If you don't know by the time your kid is 11 or 12 how they are going to react and what they are going to say if they see pornography, you have not porn-proofed your kids, because you can't porn-proof your kids. So stop trying. You know, it's not a matter of if they are going to see this stuff. It's a matter of when. And the conversation, which puts a lot of relief on the parents' part when I say this. This is not the birds and the bees conversation. This is not about what the two people are doing on screen. It's about that they shouldn't be watching the screen in the first place. This is the don't smoke when you live at my house. Don't drink when you live at my house. That's what this speech is. It's not birds and bees. It's we don't do this, or when you turn 18 or 21, you can make your own decisions, but this is not a smart thing for kids to do, and I don't want you doing it at my house. You know, just that line may drop the percentage of porn addicts by 2 or 3% if every parent would start saying it. And then when you get up to 13, 14, 15, I think that's when you can do things like talk to a 14-year-old boy about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, because it's hitting older teenagers and guys in their early 20s like never before. And most of these 14-year-old guys who end up being the guys with erectile dysfunction at such an early age because of pornography, they never wanted to be an addict. They never wanted to go down that road. It's just that when you're a 14-year-old boy and your hormones are surging through you, and you don't have a real girlfriend, which you want, you don't have a real girl to kiss, which you want, or boy, or whatever the gender lineup is. It's important that that it's recognized that a lot of these kids will now go to porn, because that's the next best thing they can have. They want the intimacy of a girlfriend or boyfriend, but at 14 they may not get it. They may not get that till 15, 16, or 17. By that time, for the men especially, it may be too late. They may have done permanent damage to their neurological system, which in turn is causing damage to their sex organs or their sex drive. So the only way that some guys can get an erection or can finish if they have porn-induced erectile dysfunction is if they're looking at pornography. Wow. And that's one of my first clients I ever had in this area was a 22-year-old guy and his 20-year-old girlfriend. He had porn-induced erectile dysfunction and wanted to get rid of it because he loved her so much. And it wasn't that he was a crazy porn consumer at 2022 or 2021 because he had her, but he did this to himself when he was 15, 16, 17. And I helped them. And the ultimate thing, the two strangest things that came out of this and taught me about this was, one, for a long time, the Band-Aid that they put on this problem was that he would sit in the bedroom, she would sit in the living room, and they would sext on their laptops or phones because his mind sitting in the other room told him he was looking at a screen. So he could look at his girlfriend on a screen and get aroused and get all that. But if she's sitting in front of him in real life, he can't. So they would basically have a sexting session, and at the very end, he would signal for her to run in the room, and they would finish like regular people finish. And she said to me that worked for a while because we didn't have to have porn playing in the room. She didn't like that. She didn't have a problem with porn. She just didn't like it playing in the room. And she said to me, I realized we needed to get help. And I mean, brilliant 20-year-old girl. I realized we needed to get help when, if we want to have a baby, pornography has to be playing in the room when it's conceived. And it's like, whoa, I had never thought of that at a 20-year-old level. And she is concerned about this. And that's what our young people are facing. But because we've got this older generation that refuses to talk about this stuff, we've got our generation that is just starting to talk about it. Well, I don't want this next generation to talk about this stuff from the point of view of me, well, I went through this for 20 years and now let's talk about it. Let's talk to these young kids now. Let's talk to the college age kids now. Let's still talk to young adults as we can get them. I understand at 24, if you're sexy, hey, OnlyFans sounds great on paper if you don't have a moral issue with it. But you don't know what the issues will be in 5 years, 15 years, 25 years. That's what we need to talk to these people about, is that, hey, you know what? Maybe it is a short-term great gain. Maybe you don't care if people see your genitals. Okay, that's cool, but you don't know where this leaves you at 40 or 50. That's what concerns me the most.
Yeah. So where can our listeners go to get more resources about pornography addiction?
Well, there are starting to be a lot more online. There are great organizations like FightTheNewDrug.org. If you're a little bit more on the religious side, I really like Covenant Eyes. If you're a little bit spiritual but not religious, I love XXXChurch.org. They're run by mostly former porn stars. But I'd also say, if you just want to dip your toe into this, I've tried to create my website, which I recently changed the name because it turns out when you put the word porn in your URL, you get a lot less hits. So my new website is actually paddictrecovery.com, with P meaning either porn or post-betrayal trauma, or I guess if pickles or penguins or whatever else starts with P, I can help you with. But on my site, I have access to all of the interviews I've ever done, as long as they're still online. You can get my books that way, but I also have a giant page of resources. If you don't want to go talk to a coach or a therapist, maybe a meeting is best for you, or maybe going online and reading forums is best for you. I'm a research guy. One of the first things I did when I got out of rehab was find every book I could. It's one of the reasons I ended up writing books, because there weren't enough for the average Joe. I can read the New England Journal of Medicine and it's okay. But if you ask me to read Shakespeare, I don't know what you're talking about. And I know a lot of people feel that way about academic journals. So that's why I created a lot of text. If you are worried you're going to get graduate level dissertations, if you're worried you're going to get a whole bunch of medical speak, I try to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I try to make it at a level where guys like me, blue collar guys can understand this, blue collar wives can understand this. I just try to create a space that lets you know you're not alone. This is real. And even if we're in a society where it's not cool or not comfortable to talk about it, there is a growing community out there, and you just need to put yourself into it. We're not going to judge. We're not going to have you fill out a questionnaire. If you need help, this community is a great community. You just have to be brave enough to walk into it.
That's great. So if our listeners want to bring you into their college campus for a talk on pornography addiction, head over to paddictrecovery.com. So it's the letter P, addictrecovery.com, and they can connect with you and then bring you into their campus, which I think this is just incredible information and a great conversation. And, we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I know you love food as well. So when I'm in Central Maine, where should I be going? What's your favorite restaurant?
Okay, well, I already told you about Olive Garden.
No, Olive Garden
No,
is terrible.
you know what? Unfortunately, the pandemic has hurt Central Maine so much that my wife and I, we live in Central Maine, Lewiston, Auburn area. Which is just near Augusta. We actually will drive 45 minutes south to Portland, because Portland, Maine, for the last 20 years, regularly shows up on every foodie list. And and you know how restaurants are, especially the small ones. Some only last 3-4 months, even if they're amazing. And every time we go to Portland, we find new small restaurants. Some survive, some don't. But if you were going to be in Portland, Maine for only one day, I would tell you in the summertime to go to the front room. You'll be sitting outside. It's beautiful, amazing food, cool culture. You're next to a park that's always got a live performer in it, and just such a wonderful place. And I don't want to slam where I live, but I don't live in the pretty mountains and I don't live on the pretty shore. So when people say to me, "Oh, Maine is beautiful," and it's like, only if you get in a car. And yes, the shore is beautiful 10 weeks a year. And yes, the mountains are beautiful 10 weeks a year. But where I live, it's beautiful 0 times a year. So you go to one of those places.
You're just brutal on Central Maine.
Yeah. Which is ironic, because I ran the magazine that was the biggest cheerleader for it. And now it's just like, okay, when I was writing my books, I'm like, I can be honest about this stuff now. This was a safe place to grow up, but this was a boring place to grow up. And there's so much parochialism here that, it's funny that when it hit the news, what happened to me, and what I did, I think that more people were not upset with the charges, but were upset with the fact that I hid who I really was. I think most people felt betrayed, not because of the charges, but because they didn't know who I was, and they thought they knew who I was. So for several years after my arrest, after I did my short jail time, and because I was so well known in Central Maine, I didn't go out and eat around here very often, because I was still very nervous about running into people who might give me a hard time. Now, in the almost 10 years since this happened, I've been given a hard time twice. But that was so much anxiety back in the day that I would leave to go to the movies, to go to eat, to go do anything, because I just didn't want to worry, oh, somebody's looking at me, and oh, somebody's looking at me. And so I fell in love with the Portland food scene then. So I would tell anybody, whether you live here, whether you're visiting once, or you're going to be here every summer, the Portland, Maine food scene is so awesome, so amazing that, yeah, we have lighthouses, and for God's sake, skip the friggin' lobster. Yeah, Maine lobster. There's so much other great stuff. Once you get the lobster and lighthouses out of your system, see what the real coastal Maine has to offer. And it's a culinary, it's one of the few good things about living in this godforsaken place.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate the recommendations. Thank you, Joshua, for what you've done here today, being just honest and transparent about this addiction. And I think our listeners are going to get a tremendous amount of value from it. So hopefully they book you to come and speak on their campus and talk more about it, maybe as a coach, maybe as a speaker, whatever. But it's good to know the resources that are out there. So I really appreciate the time today. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
And thank you for, letting me have access to your listenership. It's one of these things where I have a message, you have a medium, and we can't do it without each other. For so many years, I was the medium guy when I worked in journalism. So now it's interesting being on the message side of things, and I know how important you are to this. So thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it, and keep doing the good work you're doing. And you're going to take me out for a meal sometime.
That sounds good. That's a deal. So to our listeners, thank you so much for being here. Please like it and share it so that way other college students get to hear Joshua's message on this really important topic. And we'll see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.